In this video, I'm going to demonstrate a custom function block designed to let a Modicon PLC control Altivar over Modbus Ethernet. So in this case, I wanted to have everything with regards to the drive that I care about surrounding this function block. So the first thing that I'm looking at is I can actually see that I'm looking at the scan health of the actual drive itself. I can see that it's green, that the motor's not running, and that the motor is not faulted at this point. If I actually come and disconnect the actual Ethernet cable, you'll see it go from green to red, and I'll see that I get an IO scan error and the motor's actually faulted. If I actually come back in here and I plug the cable back in, I'll see the red health bits go to green. I know I'm healthy. I'm still faulted. I have an IO scan error. So now that I'm healthy, I can come in here on the reset and I can set this to a 1. The motor's no longer faulted. The message actually shows no fault on the drive. So I'm going to set that back up to here. And I know that the motor's not running. So as part of this, I have a variable that I created that let me put in the speed reference that I want to go to. So right now I'm commanding it to go to 1200 RPMs. So if I come in here and give it a forward command, you can see it ramping up, going up to 1200 RPMs. You can see the motor running, and you can see the motor current actually here. So it's a very nice way to do it. And in setting up this block, the drive obviously has to be configured in the proper way to communicate with this. So because of the fact that I don't always remember stuff, I have a built-in help that we put into the block. And there's a couple basic things. So on the scanner in-out parameter of the drive, by default, you're going to have a command word and a target velocity to go to. And on the scanner in, you're going to have an ETA, which is the status, and an actual speed. What I added was 3 more parameters to look at: motor current, motor thermal, and what the last fault was. So in addition to doing that, I wanted to set up the control parameters from being controlled over Ethernet. So the Altivar 320 DTMs and the 630 DTMs use a little bit different verbiage, but bottom line is the frequency reference needs to be, in the 320 they call it a COM card, and the 630 they call it embedded Ethernet. On the control card for the start stopping, on the 320 they call it a COM card, and on the 630 they call it Ethernet. And the last thing that I wanted to do for setup was I wanted to be able to reset it via the terminal strip and a control word in the scanner. So instead of having it as being a logical input, I changed it to a CDO3, which is actually the 4th bit in the control word. And bit 3 in the digital control word is the terminology they use in the 630. And for control profile, there's 2 different ways of controlling a drive. There's the CIA COM standard, which is a state machine, which is a little more difficult. I like changing this parameter in the drives to what's called IO profile or IO mode. And it basically makes the command word emulate the terminal strip on the drive. So the first bit would be like logic input 1 and be able to make the drive run forward or reverse. So the basic configuration parameters are built right inside this help file, and going from there. So if I go into the actual DTMs and how this is configured, double click in the NOC, I can come here and I can see that this is my Modbus request here, where I set up my IP addresses. And if I go into the items, I simply want to go into the input mapping, and I want to define the items like it is shown in the input map on the help file. So when I build this project, it'll create a variable that matches exactly what I look like. And on the output, I want to come in here and define the items in the proper variable types to match up with what my function block is looking for. So if I'm doing Modbus Ethernet like this, I actually have to build the table manually like this. If I'm using one of the DTMs that's built in, it actually opens up the configuration file of the drive within the window. I go to my parameters list, I go to control drive profile, and you can see here that the default was the first 2 in the in and the out. I had to come and add these parameters to make it work with my function block. Adding is pretty simple. You right click, you add, and you go from there. So if I come back to this drive here, in this section of my code, I have it set up to look at an Altivar 320 DTM. This section looks at it as if it was a Modbus generic DTM, and down here in the bottom, which I only have one drive connected right now, shows it how to do to a 630 DTM. I'll shut this drive down right now. Stop it so I can actually see it slowing down. The other thing that you're going to notice is when I come into the actual data editor, it creates an in-out in M340 for all the words for you. So in my in, if I'm using the DTM, if I set it up like we talked about, you'll actually have the words there. And here's my out, my command in my LFRD. And if I go to the 320, one of the things that you're going to notice is the DTM for the 320 makes the ETA an unsigned int. Inside the 630, it makes it a word. So those are incompatible data types. So in order to make this work, what I would have had to do is I would have had to use some conversion, going my word to unsigned int, put this value into here. And on the output, I'd actually have to use this unsigned into Word in order to make it work to scan the actual drive itself. One of the nice things that's actually happening is if I go to Tools, Project Settings, and if I come into the common area, I can actually check this box here for implicit conversion type. And if I check that box, then it's actually go here like this. If I check that box, then it allows so that I don't have to have those data types. It sees the int is an unsigned int, or the word is an unsigned int, so I can just put them right on here. I no longer need these function blocks, so this will work with everything. So it's critical that you check that box, otherwise you're going to have to use these devices here like this. So when I post this video on YouTube, this file will be in the comment sections down below, along with the function blocks. Feel free to use this and make any comments, and I will do the source code unlock so you can modify it any way you want. Thank you very much.